Hey everyone, how's it going? Here's a little update of what's going on. Got the new engine installed, got the aftermarket clutch. It was an Extedi Stage 2 4-puck sprung clutch, so that's now in it with its matching pressure plate. Motor mount to transmission is all bolted up. I got the stainless steel headers in, but it turns out the reason why you don't see videos or hear a lot of people putting headers in RX-8s because they are an actual pain in the ass. You got all those bolts up there, which are easy to get to. But then that one right there, and that one right back in there are basically impossible. I actually had to custom modify some 14 mil wrenches to actually fit inside there and tighten those two bolts up. But other than that, it's going pretty well, just besides those two being a pain in the ass. And the motor mount, because the motor mount was touching right here, and then the EGR tube up here was actually touching the motor mount. Over here, it seemed kind of good, but I still did a little clearancing just in case. But this is what all of it looks like. This one has an exhaust system, all MagnaFlow. Pretty nice. And this is how far you actually gotta chop the motor mounts. It's just the passenger side mainly. I had to flatten that down just so it clears the EGR tube. Now that does. Kind of see how much had to come out of it. And then the bottom one right down here. You have to cut this one back all about an inch, half inch, just to actually clear the header flange. And then once you do that, then you got to do a little chop right here to clear the actual header tube. And then you got to do another little rounding on this inch just to clear that header tube in the middle. And I just notched this one just a little bit just to actually make sure it's good. But you can see how far it had been cut back. And most cars, you don't really want to cut or modify the motor mounts at all, just because the way the whole weight and everything is distributed. But on RX-8s, Miatas, and FD RX-7s, and a few other cars, they actually have a torque brace that goes from the transmission to the rear end. So there's actually very little flex when it actually comes to these motor mounts, because if they didn't have that torque brace, that motor mount would not pass. You will shear it either right here or right here if you dump that clutch hard one time, if this particular vehicle didn't have a torque brace. But since it does, that's how you're able to actually get away with a little bit of modification to the motor mounts. Let me get up in there with this and show you guys what I'm talking about. It's a bit of a pain in the ass to work it up in here too. Hoping the O2 sensor is going to clear, because that's a really tight gap. The headers fit pretty good though. I like them. I'll show you guys how the motor mount goes up in here. Go like that. Cha-cha. Slides over the top. And boom. Looks like it's still touching the EGR tube just a tiny bit, so I probably got to do a little bit more clearancing on that. We can see how I had to chop all that out just so it's clear. Now the hole lines up. Same thing with that one. I just got to do a tiny bit more clearancing right there on where the EGR tube is, and then the motor mounts are going in, and this car is getting finished. Should be done by tonight, if not tomorrow. Customer's going to be happy with this. Got some new motor with 40 to 60,000 miles on it, long tube headers, complete tune-up and everything else, so he's going to be really happy with this. I know I would be. I had the engine supported by the cherry picker just so I can actually maneuver it side to side to clear the motor mounts and everything else. All the vacuum lines are ran that need to stay underneath the intake manifold. The injectors are all plugged in. I'm going to put the oil filter, oil inside of it, tighten up the actual oil cooler lines. I have them just hand tightened, they're not actually torqued down. But get that one tightened and get that one that's hidden underneath the AC compressor tightened. Put the motor mounts on, tighten up the AC compressor, and pretty much put the whole top end back together. It's actually going together pretty nicely. It was a pain in the ass, but it's working out. Here's some more of the 8mm vacuum hose to finish up the rest. These are the gaskets that came with the headers. I personally don't like these. Like, if the car already had these on it, then might as well just use the brand new ones. But if you have the factory OEM gaskets that are multi-layer steel, use those instead. The car unfortunately didn't have one of those for the header to the rest of the exhaust system, so I am going to have to use this one, sad to say. It shouldn't give them any problems, but at the same time, if you like taking your car apart, swapping things out, exchanging stuff, those don't really last too long on that. Spark plugs, spark plug wires, the rest of the heater hose. It's pretty much everything. Top intake manifold. If you guys haven't seen, this is all now plumbed up, zip tied. This car ain't gonna see any boost, but just still zip tied just for extra precaution, because you never know. Especially when it comes to your oil metering system. If you're not going to use zip ties anywhere else, at least put zip ties on these so you know you're getting proper vacuum to your oil metering injectors, your oil injectors, so you know your engine's getting proper lubrication. I suggested the owner of this car to run a 1/2 ounce per gallon because he still has the oil injection. Do it every other fill up and he should be good. All the rest of the hoses are in. Got the spaghetti noodle nests in here. That's all the rest of the heater hose. Heater and AC, or not AC, but heater and radiator lines. But it's just a little update of what's going on. This thing's flying together pretty nicely. Shouldn't be too much longer and they'll be back together. And when you're a true rotary geek, you gotta have an RX-7 coffee cup or RX-8. They make them in both. But if you'd like to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I have more videos coming up. Have a good one.